Good afternoon, are we ready to move on to the workshop session? I hope you've all had some time to look at the student posters and enjoy the food also. So this afternoon there's going to be a bit of a change of format, so I hope you've got your thinking caps on. I think we're going to do a bit of table participation, and we're also going to be using the yellow sheets of paper which are in your packs. But I will now invite Iain Sterland back on stage, and he will talk you through everything for the workshop session.
Thanks, Helen. Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the workshop session of Doug. This is where we fed you, but we expect you to do something now. At least stay awake or sleep without snoring. So I think I'd like to start by saying the Doug conference, I think, is one of the few occasions, certainly that I know of, where people from a corporate, from academic and from a government institutions can really meet and talk around a theme of common interest. I don't know of many, if any, of any other forums. So I think we're quite unique. And the other thing to say on this is this, for me and for my Doug members, is very much your session. We create the theme, but this is where you, I think, get the chance to think about what you've heard so far, and to reflect and share and discuss among the corporate world, the academic world, and the government world. What it means to you, whether there are any kind of things that you're going to take away and do differently, and that's really the now what in the workshop session title. So just to reiterate, this is where you should get most benefit from today, because hopefully you'll find a new idea, a new approach, or you'll hear a new perspective that you can take away and use and develop. So our conference theme, how can we make better decisions through database analysis? How can we influence decision makers through those means? And I think particular emphasis is on visualization, distilling what the meaning of the data you have, and the story it tells. So our three speakers this morning, I thought gave great insights into how data visualizations can make a difference. And also Mark Chivers gave us a great insight, I think, into the decision makers world, which is quite different, I think, from the analysts world. So James Cheshire showed us some real great data-driven and innovative visualizations of London, bringing all of that kind of complexity of the capital and its people to life. I think, for me, James's work fits into sort of data science and infographics, and I think this is a term, I don't think I'm making this up, but I think data art is an emerging term, and I think that's certainly where James's book sits, probably alongside some of the other works. I don't know if any of you know work of David McCandless. So he's produced a couple of books, Information is Beautiful, and the very creatively named successor, Knowledge is Beautiful, but I can recommend them, they're very good. And then Alan gave us his insights from the world of data journalism. Those four principles, design with the data that you have, provide context to the user, to the reader, put in some empathy if you can, and if you can surprise, then surprise. So that for me is really useful to take away. I think one of the other things, talking at lunch from Alan's presentation, is that those steps to tailor those charts and visualizations seemed to be something we could all do. A lot of it was within our power, or within our gift for the tools that we have at our disposal on the desktop. And I pegged that under data journalism, which I think is a very distinct field that's emerged over the last few years. And alongside the Financial Times, I'd probably put certainly the Guardian's data blog. I don't know, probably most of you know that, and also A guy called Nate Silver, who used to be at the New York Times, has a website now called 538.com, and that's got some great data journalism in that as well, so one to watch as well. What's evident from both James and Alan's speeches, I think, are that visual devices are very, very powerful when you get them right. I think they give a really immediate way to communicate complex information, and they can really reveal stories within the data. If they're done well, I think, more people will understand your message, and they'll get it sooner. And I think more people will be persuaded to a greater degree when you get that right. But then, what was great about Mark Chivers' presentation was how he gave us that insight into the decision maker's world, and it is very different from the analyst world. If you are a decision maker, how do you cope now, as Mark said, with more uncertainty? In a world where, as Mark said, business models are changing, failing, new models are coming up. How do you cope with that? And are you really making rational decisions? And should you really be making rational decisions in the face of uncertainty? That whole question of how rational is our decision making, and how normative it is, and how those two kind of weld together, I guess. And I suppose my going on from that, I think we are on a long and upward trend in which our lives are just becoming more visually driven. And it's no surprise because of technology. We've probably who hasn't got a smartphone? Put your hand up. Okay. Oh, one. Right, Blair. Yeah. Why am I not surprised? Okay, so Retina Displays, where you can't see the pixels. When I was kind of growing up, and you were playing computer games or whatever, you thought they were great, but really the visuals were crap, really. Not today. Retina displays mean you can't see the pixels effectively. Smartphones, high bandwidth broadband, just purely insane amounts of processing power for virtually no cost. Just conspire to push visuals at us all the time, I think. One of the things I was reflecting on is that, websites used to look like websites. If you kind of go back on the Internet Archive, and even with the BBC kind of look past the years, you knew you were looking at a website. Now I don't think you do. Now I think even most blogging sites, and my daughter runs a blog, has done for that last 4 years since she was 14, she very quickly got to a standard where the look and the feel and the quality was similar to the preserve of high-end fashion magazines. And I just, that's quite amazing. And it's there for most people to do, I think. The other thing I mentioned, I think there's two other complementary trends that we need to bring in. The first is data. So open data, data's abundant, there's personal data, there's location data. There's just giant conveyor belts of data everywhere in most organisations, from loyalty cards, from payments, from phones. And then if the Internet of Things ever happens, then God help us, I think. But the second thing I'd like to bring in is open source software. Open source software, it's where coders come together to create open, free software applications. A vast array out there. They're very good. They rival their commercial counterparts. And, they are works in progress. Features are added. Features are sponsored by companies. And people can actually make a living at this. And I think, we're seeing open source now, I think, being the mainstay of students and a lot of academic institutions. But it's starting to work its way into business. In Sainsbury's, we're starting to look at, okay, we'll get QGIS rather than the commercial GIS package. We'll start using R alongside SAS. Maybe we'll get rid of SAS, I don't know. And there are lots of notable kind of applications and code libraries across the fields of programming, of databases, of data analysis, geography, web design, and particularly, I think, data visualization. So just switching back to us as analysts, we've got amazing resources, and that should be good, I think. But it is, I think it throws up some questions and challenges, particularly around visualization. So more data, great, but there's more things to consider in our analysis, yeah? And we're going to have to work a bit harder to figure out who are the main characters in our story that we're going to play out to our decision maker. A new software, that's great. Open source software, it's free. But certainly, again, speaking from personal experience, I don't know what it's like for the other corporates. You have to persuade your IT department that you can use it, yeah, that it's supportable, that it won't blow up the rest of their precious infrastructure. And then visualization libraries. So the one that I've been looking at is a JavaScript library called Data-Driven Documents. Superb interactive charts. But unless you can code, I'm not very good at coding. I've forgotten most of what I knew, which was not a lot, and a long time ago. I hear you say. But it's only accessible if you know how to code. So what use is that for most of us here, realistically? But then I think the big one for me is design. So we've seen some amazing graphics today. When you type in infographic on the internet, you'll see some amazing kind of education and information infographics. But all of those require great design and a lot of time. And truth be told, I think many of the infographics that are out there, they're finely crafted marketing devices to drive you to a website. Yeah, you get something in return, obviously, but that's what they're there for. And they're the product of marketeers, and they're the product of a graphic designer or a graphic design team. So I think we really have to sort of question how achievable those sorts of devices and artifacts are within our organisations, and if so, what place they would occupy. However, you know, ever the optimist, analysts can learn to code, or you can hire a coder. There are more and more about, and you can also hire graphic designers and artists for those special projects. And again, in Sainsbury, speaking from experience, attitudes in our IT teams are softening, I think, as both data analytics and open source software enters the mainstream. So, almost the time. It's now kind of over to you. On your tables, in your packs, you should find a buff-coloured sheet like that. Now, Keith has kindly printed some more out. So, as he said, if you've been clumsy enough to lose yours, I don't know how you do that, but don't worry. Don't worry. I'll walk around after this and distribute some extra ones. That's not a problem. So the format is really simple. We're going to work, or you're going to work until about 3 o'clock, and you're going to have fun. That's the thing. You're going to have fun, and you're going to talk to each other. Okay. Hands up. How many people are on a table where they don't know at least 2 people? So that's quite a complex. So that's good. That's good. A bit of diversity. That's actually probably more thinking than you'll have to do to fill this in. So that's good news. We thought we'd start you off with an icebreaker. It's on the top of the sheet. Think of a time where either you or someone in your organisation did a great piece of work, a great piece of analysis, but actually it didn't get the right result or the intended result. And just share that. You know, that's our icebreaker. Do that for what we now call past probably 5 or 10 minutes. Then we've got kind of 4 key questions, which I hope are reflective of the topic that we've got. So first, what's needed for you to achieve better visualization? Second, what's needed to better distill analyses or analysis to help decision makers? The third is about influence. How can we increase our influence on decision makers? And then the fourth is very much switching you into the decision maker's world. So what skills do you think decision makers need to operate in a data-driven world? So have a go at those. Put your own thoughts down. Discuss it in your tables, across your tables. Do that till about probably about 2:45 as a guide. And then what we'd like you to do is, as a group, for each one of those questions, just nominate your one thought or action or response. Yeah. At 3 o'clock, we'll come back, and we won't be able to hear from everybody. We'll open it up to the floor. Okay. So, with any questions? No. Have I? Yeah. I've done a good job at persuading you to do that. That's excellent. So off you go. Thank you very much. Right, the mic's on. That's good. Brilliant level of energy, people. Fantastic. I think you should give yourself a round of applause. Yeah, fantastic. So lots of energy. Were there lots of thoughts? So not a lot of structure to this, except to say we've got kind of 4 questions. I'd like to hear a little bit from the floor. I've got some notes in case you're all evil and don't like me, but just to hear a little bit about some of the things that you were coming up with and that you're going to take away with you. I think, have we got anyone on roving mics? Could we have some help on roving mics? That'd be good. Fantastic. Thank you very much, both of you. So, who wants to start us off? Start for 10 on what's needed to achieve better visualisation. Don't all rush at once. Oh, brilliant, Alistair. Thank you.
Well, we make a point that it's not about technology and it's not about more polished pictures. It's largely about impact of a visualization. It's nice if things look good, and it's good, obviously, if things looking good and being effective way of sharing information's a critical part if you are going to have impact. But there's no point in doing something nice if it's not going to make a difference to your business or to your industry somehow.
Sure. Brilliant, thank you. Anyone else?
We said, obviously, other than things been highlighted before, which is the time to do it, is understanding your audience and how they visualise things and how they can understand their data, and knowing your narrative so you know what story you're trying to tell with your visualisation.
All right, excellent, brilliant. And next, oh, yeah. I'm sure a hand just went up there.
Yeah, just building on those points, I think for us, training was also an issue. So we've got a lot of people that are very good at traditional tools like SAS and Excel, but things like R are pretty new to us, so we need to bridge that gap.
Splendid, all right. We also had, I think, on the table I was on, so we echoed some of those points. So making time to learn was actually a big one. Stepping out, giving yourself permission to take time out was a big one. We had a really interesting one. Always have an experimental project on the go. Which I thought was great. I think, and practicalities of some of our jobs might work against that, but great idea. We were talking. Matthew Hopkinson from Local Data Company was on our table, and they run a web portal. It's got, Matthew, how many developers have you got? About 8. Do you just want to say a little bit about, sorry about that, just a little bit about how they kind of approach, I suppose what I call it, innovation?
Yes, I suppose the interesting challenge, we're a small company, is if you want to recruit and retain the very best to take yourself forward. So, and we have a multinational people, and some have come and gone, but we've got a great core group now where it's about enabling them to excel in an area that they're interested, which is aligned to the business needs. Now, that's very easy to say in a sentence, but it's a blooming nightmare to maintain. But you get it to a point where they do go off at weekends and come back, having created something at home in their sitting room, and say, I was tinkering around with this, what do you think? And it's amazing that you get that. So you can't formalise it in that regard. But we strive to look at putting 2% of our revenues into training and development of staff at different levels, because they all want, whether you're in sales or research, they all want to develop themselves. And we think, our duty, and whether it's they leave our company and go somewhere else, that's life. Our duty is to try and retain them, but that's what we strive for.
Excellent, brilliant, thank you very much. Second question. So what's needed to better distill analyses to help decision makers? Who wants to start us off on question 2? Jonathan.
Okay, Ian, so the danger here is there's a bunch of academics at this table. So the first thing we did was to question the whole premise of that question.
Very good, very good.
That took us the first half hour. But what we ended up with actually is to say, well, is it always wise to distill analysis? Is it possible in some instances? Because actually, some problems are inherently complex, and reducing them to the nth possible degree, you might actually lose some of the richness and the variety in that problem by trying to present it so simplistically perhaps, to a decision maker. So thinking about techniques that could model complexity in more realistic ways, scenario planning, that kind of thing, looking at alternative futures, could be one way in which you could create the impression of simplicity, but actually also capture more complex ideas.
Brilliant. So clearly, when Keith and I crafted these questions, we expected the academics to challenge the premise on which we were kind of basing the question. So fantastic. Who's next?
Yeah, I suppose just to pick that point up, because we weren't an academic table, the world is a complex place, but we still have to make decisions. And actually, the way humans make decisions is typically by throwing information away. So the role of an analyst is to help guide them through the process of throwing information away. So I suppose that would be my first observation. We actually had the same answer to question 2 as we did to question 1, because it's kind of the same problem for us, I think. So how do we better distill analysis? Well, we need better questions from the decision makers, actually, because quite often we get rubbish questions. It's partly our role to help them ask good questions, but mostly they could just ask good questions. The second is when we're answering those questions, we need to have a compelling story. We need to tell the story. We want to make them want to listen and make them want to engage, which is essentially what the FT has to do. It's not different for analysts. The third thing is we have to recognise audience conditioning. What is the audience conditioned to expect? Which leads us to our fourth thing, which is essentially better charting in Excel. Because that's what they're conditioned to see.
Excellent. One more.
Hi, it's Tony Birch from Shop Direct here. When we talked, we went down the channel of thinking about better understanding of decision makers and understanding the whole decision process and your role in it. Because to some extent, the analysis is often a very small part, even though when we're working on it, it feels like a very big part. So it's more about that, maybe constant communication with the decision makers, and I say understanding your role within it. The analogy I can get closest to that is a personal one, I suppose, that leading up to my marriage, I thought this is only obviously going to be a big day in my life. It's going to be fantastic. Post the marriage, and I realised I had a small walk-on part in my wife's biggest day of her life.
And dare we ask you about decision making? No. we know the answer. Yeah, we know the answer. All right. Fantastic. I'll just tell that with a few things. So knowing who the decision maker is, what do they need? We had a great insight, I thought, from our two home-based colleagues, was some decision makers will actually, they don't want a polished and finished result if they can get the rough and ready results quicker in their hands to act on. We also kind of had these we talked about these two archetypes, integrators, I think, and visionaries. So visionaries, you know, give me the executive summary, give me the big picture. Integrators, actually, I want the detail. And storytelling kind of came up quite strongly as well. So on to number 3, what's needed to increase our influence on decision makers? Who's going to start us off with that one? Oh, Keith, thank you.
Yes, the words that came out from this table, not from me, were more dialogue, don't stand back, get analysts involved, more secondments within and across organisations, which I thought was a particularly interesting one. Speak the language of the decision makers. So an awful lot of dialogue and trying to get in under each other's skin, really.
Very good. Does that strike a chord with anyone else, or does anyone want to kind of challenge that, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about a number of things on 2 and 3, but this point about having a relationship with a decision maker, being able to have a conversation as equals, and having enough long-term credibility. And we started to talk about trust, and a decision as a decision maker is a lot easier to make if you trust the analysis and the analyst that is bringing the analysis. So trust, relationship, long-term credibility, all part of the same story.
Fantastic, yeah, and I think that was largely echoed on our table. Repeated success was also talked about, so the building of trust and understanding, honesty, and also I think some behavioural stuff, I think, on behalf of us as analysts. So a recognition that passion plays a great part, as well as resilience and the desire to support and stick with something even when it's difficult, I think. So number 4, stepping into the world of the decision maker, either because you are one or because this is what you think decision makers today need more of. So the new skills that you think decision makers need to operate in a data-driven world. Question the premise and the suppositions as much as you want. Who wants to start us off?
So I'll give our easy answer, which is we need analysts as chief executives. So no pressure, Mark.
Mark, is there any news you want to tell us about? No. Okay. Who's next?
We had a couple of people on the table that had been involved in running the national census, actually, and so we were reflecting on taking our own medicine, and we were reflecting on how when we are doing analytical work and coordinating big survey and data collection operations, we've got to base it on good evidence, we've got to base it on good data, and in a sense that's what we want and we expect decision makers in every walk of life to do. So that's a good place to start. I think we've got to work to get the decision makers more numerate, more willing to invite analysts into the rooms, because as the answers to the previous question said, it's all about getting in the right rooms, basically. You know, if you're not there when the decisions are being planned and when the decisions are being made, you can produce the best visualization, the best data analysis in the world, but it's going to sit on a shelf or sit on a website somewhere. So I think we have to be quite pushy to make sure that the decision makers invite us into those rooms. And then when we're in there, it's about making sure that we can be credible and we can demonstrate that getting our advice is worthwhile. So there's a lot actually rests on us to just get in there.
Very good. Yeah. Does anyone want to add to that, Martin?
Hi, just responding to that. I think most board members have got some degree of numeracy, but I think they think about the pounds and the pence and understand it and look at that and work with accountants and the finance teams, and that's taken as read. I think there's a big opportunity for analysts to operate that same kind of level of understanding and communication using data, but obviously not financial data, to help the board understand and to make decisions. And I think that's something where there's a great opportunity for us.
So just throwing that open to the floor, does anyone kind of think they're operating at that level or in that way at the moment? Okay, so maybe it's not. Maybe there's none of you doing that, or maybe it wasn't a particularly oh, Lisa in the corner.
Sorry, I think there's just building on Martin's point. For analysts, there's a need for them to have some commercial acumen as well.
Yeah.
Because what you often find is you can't roll it up to the pounds, notes, and pence, because you get so involved in the data and not understanding the bigger question. So I think probably going back to the point on the first point around training, actually giving analysts some exposure to what the world of the decision maker is like and what is the commercial metrics that they're trying to get to would then enable the route from analysis to real insight.
Yeah, that was great point. I think just to finish off some of the other stuff that certainly was talked about on the table that I was on. We'd like, and this was generally endorsed, we'd like decision makers to be open. I think that's a given anyway, but particularly open to change and challenge. I think there's also a thing, something about being aware, if you are a decision maker, what decision mode you're operating in. So. How much is the rational side of me or the rational arguments holding sway, or actually am I in normative mode? And maybe I have to be in normative mode because this decision and the things around it are so uncertain. And then the final thing that we talked about was it would be great to think of that decision maker, even if they are quite senior and possibly remote, as a decision partner, and to have the confidence that you are both working on the same side. Certainly, I know that sometimes doesn't feel as if it's the case. So yeah, I think we're almost at 20 past. We're almost at tea and coffee time. Any final points that anybody wants to add before we close this session? No, you're all in need of tea. Well, from the conference organisers, from me, thank you very much for your participation. Clearly, you weren't kind of soporific with food, and you were definitely kind of energised. And thank you very much. And again, give yourself a round of applause. Thank you. Oh, one last thing, folks. If you leave these on your table, if that's all right, we'll collect them in and we'll get them typed up.
Thank you very much, Iain. If you would all like to come back at 22, that would be great. Thank you.